Murder is one of the worst crimes that could be committed by a human being. Taking away someone's life is the ultimate act of horror. But what happens when these criminals go unpunished because of the lack of evidence or simply the police not being able to locate the culprit? We like to think that every person who commits murder is eventually caught so they cannot strike again, but the reality is this isn't always the case. As we take a look at this video, any one of these people in this list could be alive today and walking our streets. The first unsolved case of murder on our list began on February 9th, 2006 in Salt Lake City, when a Hispanic woman was brutally attacked and killed in her own home. The lady was assaulted and strangled, with some of her possessions from her apartment being stolen. Originally, the police suspected this as a one-off killing and burglary. But exactly after 2 years of the killing, on February 9th, 2008, another Hispanic woman was actually killed in her own home. Again, both cases struck as similar, as both ladies were killed in the exact same way. There were items again stolen from both apartments, and also in both apartments there was no forced entry, meaning that the murderer must have gained the trust of both of these women. With both killings taking place on February 9th, this unknown assailant was dubbed as the February 9th Killer. What's interesting about this case is police actually have DNA evidence and profiling of the killer. Unfortunately, this does not match anyone on the police database. This means, unless the murderer actually surrenders a sample of DNA or is caught for a different crime, it's highly unlikely the person will ever be caught, and it's perfectly possible that this person is still walking the streets today. This has now become a cold case due to the lack of developments over the past few years. In 1946, there was a case of serial killings that gripped the region of Texarkana in fear. Attacks happened for several months on weekends at night. These attacks led to 5 people being killed and 3 people being seriously injured. The case was so unusual that it actually inspired the movie, The Town That Dreaded Sundown. One of the 3 people that were actually injured was able to give a chilling description of the attacker. The attacker was described by the injured victim as 6 foot tall, with a white sack over their head with eye holes cut out and also a mouth hole. From this, it was assumed the killer wore a mask during his attacks. Due to the mask, a clear description of the face could never be given. The victims were often shot by a .32 caliber pistol, 3 weeks apart exactly. All of the shootings were carried out at night on the weekend. The killer was dubbed the Phantom Killer due to the local sheriffs describing the man as the luckiest person he has ever known. No one really seeing him, hearing him, or even getting a look at him. It is believed that this could be the early work of the popular Zodiac Killer, but this has never been proven in any way. The murders suddenly came to a stop, and no one was ever convicted of the crimes, and after they stopped, nothing similar had ever happened again. In the 1970s, prejudice was rife over the gay community. Being gay in this time was scary and terrifying, not just for the fear of judgment by communities or people around, but a case of murder that took place over gay men that were killed gruesomely and sadistically. The killer would gain the trust of the victims in order to gain access to their homes. He would then ask the victim if he could sketch them. After the sketch was completed, he would then proceed to stab them. This occurred between 1974 and 1975, which left 14 young gay men dead, striking fear across the region of San Francisco, which at the time was hailed as the most accepting of gay communities. Many gay people resisted coming out with a gay identity due to the spree of murders that were taking place at the time. 3 young men actually survived the attacks, but they were so traumatized that they never actually testified against the suspect due to fearing any repercussions. This murder was nicknamed the Doodler, as he sketched his victims before murdering them. The case has long been placed on hold, as no one was ever convicted of the killings. In February 2009, a man walking his dog made a discovery of human bones. He reported this to the police, and once the area was investigated, it turned into the largest crime scene in US history. The dog walker had discovered a dumping ground for an unknown serial killer who was using the area as a discarding place for his victims. The area in New Mexico was searched thoroughly, and the remains of 11 women were discovered. It turns out all 11 women were actually prostitutes, so this made for easy victims for the serial killer. What's more is the killer was very careful in what he did. After the bodies were discovered, not a single piece of evidence was found that can link anyone to the killings. There was no DNA, no murder weapons, and no descriptions of the killer. To this very day, prostitutes are fearful for their lives, as no one has ever been convicted of these murders, so it's possible the assailant is still living or even scouting in that area for potential victims. Since the discovery of the bodies, no other murder linked to this individual has been committed. Clients who are visiting the area and paying for the prostitutes often use fear tactics to exploit the women, claiming they are the serial murderer, and they do this to avoid payment or simply for thrills. With the way the bodies were found, this serial killer was dubbed the Bone Collector. With no evidence, no one has ever been convicted of these murders. A very strange series of killings took place in the early 1970s, where 3 young girls were discovered murdered. While the victims were all young females, the case was strange because each girl's initials started with the same letter. The girls' names were Cameron Colon, Wanda Wolkowicz, and Michelle Menza. This could be coincidence, but the press used this as fuel for their stories and articles. During the investigations, police arrested multiple suspects. Due to the pressure and stress of the investigation, one of these suspects committed suicide. Many accused this man of being guilty, but at a later date in 2007, with the help of DNA testing, this man's name was cleared. Likewise, another suspect in the case was one of the victim's uncles, but again, he was cleared via DNA evidence. While no one has been directly charged with these murders, one man has been a suspect after moving away from the area, and the killings seem to stop. This man claims he is innocent, but has never been formally convicted of the killings that took place, neither has he been charged. And yet, another twist in the case happened in 2011, when a 77-year-old man was charged with the murder of 4 women in California in the late 1970s. While he hasn't been directly accused of being involved in the Alphabet murder case, what is strange is the 4 women that he killed in California all shared the same initials, which seems very similar in nature. But at the same time of making this video, this man's trial has been repeatedly postponed. He hasn't at the moment been directly convicted of the killings of these 3 young girls, but nonetheless, it does seem very suspicious.